Well, what are your codes of conduct? Where did you learn about values? And who even told you that these things are important? Growing up, my mother loved to tell stories. She was raising 3 boys, so I guess she assumed that telling stories would be the most effective method for teaching us values. Now, she especially enjoyed telling stories about my dad. She felt that he was a good model for us to look to as we were learning to become men. So she tells us one story about an interaction that happened between him and her father. Now, this is probably about the late 60s, early 70s, and they're much younger. They're starting to date. And my father happens to visit the house, her house, on a day that my grandparents are off at market, and she's home alone. So my mother, without thinking much of it, decides to invite him in. And they're enjoying their time together. I guess so much so that they have totally lost track of time. My mother realizes how much time has passed and asks him to leave immediately, hoping to avoid what could be a pretty tense interaction should her father come home and find the two of them together. So my father now is leaving the house. There was a stairway that led outside the house, outside the kitchen, while my mom is still inside the kitchen. And it's from inside the kitchen that my mother hears her father's voice. And now she realizes that both men are inside the house and that they're just moments away from being face to face. She waits nervously inside the kitchen, expecting to hear some commotion. But she's not hearing the commotion. Now, it's very possible that my father saw him in time and knew to hide, or that my grandpa had already killed him and was just disposing of his body. So that could have explained the silence too. But she walks out to see these 2 men just engaging in a very warm and casual conversation. You see, my grandfather owned a shop at the center of our small town in Jamaica. This is where the community would gather to get all of their basic items. So it was a meeting spot for the community. But it was also a local hangout spot for the men of that community. This is where the men would go to have an evening drink, to play dominoes, and just to converse. And my father would stop by from time to time. Now, from what I understand, he never said much. But I guess from what he did say, he was able to convince his future father-in-law that he was a good man and that he would do what was right, even if he was alone with his daughter. You see, we're not seeing a lot of men like this anymore. A man like him has almost become an endangered species in our day. But there was a time where, from a male's perspective, from a man's perspective, showing honor and respect to a woman was considered the right thing to do. See, what they understood was that we all came from a woman, and that made them unique. It only seemed right that we should treat them with honor and respect. But because they were unique, we created special rules for them. We called it a code of honor. No one had to say anything. It was a code. It was just something that you did. But that's why we went hungry, so that she could eat. We waited at the back of sinking ships and risked our lives just so she could walk to safety. And even when we couldn't control our egos, we reached for our swords and we fought for their honor. I believe that I was more of a man if she was honored. I believe that I was more of a man if she was respected. It's not that she couldn't do for herself, but she represented the vehicle she represented the vehicle through which life entered into this world. And we valued her for that. And this was to be taught to a generation of boys and the generations of boys that would come behind them, so that they too would know that the woman should always be valued. But along the way, this code that was based in honor became a guy code. Now, what is the guy code? The guy code, in essence, reflects a value system. But more specifically, it is the cultural standard for male interaction as it relates to females. Now, to compare the guy code to another value system would be as if you were comparing two different men, because you have two different mentalities. The first man deeply valued the woman and considered his relationship with her to be a high achievement. It was through her that he could build a family. It was through her that he could build a legacy. And so he would attempt to conquer the world if this meant that he could have the woman's hand. There was no greater accomplishment than having the woman by his side. Now, we wouldn't have to go all the way back to Victorian ships and knights in shining armor. It wasn't so long ago that songs like "The Girl Is Mine" and "My Girl" rose to the top of the charts, reflecting a culture of men that still viewed their relationship with the woman in high respect and high honor. But the world was changing. Revolutions had occurred, and the way that we began to view sex and relationships were also changing. Television came along and confused the culture, and this placed an immense amount of pressure on the man, because now he was supposed to be as bold as an action hero, as emotionally connected as a therapist, and as romantic as the Latin lover. And so the man, he rebelled against these unrealistic expectations. And he was not convinced that it was the woman that needed to be conquered, not the world. As a result, we began to popularize artists who referred to women as bitches and hoes, and we convinced the culture that the woman was no longer as valuable. A new mentality arose. And so now, the less I valued her, the more of a man I was. The less of an emotional attachment I had to her, the more endeared I was. And the less I was willing to invest in her, the more prudent I appeared to be. The prize was no longer the relationship with the woman and having the woman by your side. The prize was now the conquest of the woman and being able to tell that story of how that woman was conquered. This dialogue, these stories, these interactions, in essence, reflect the current guy code. Now, I do want to be careful here. This is not to say that we should blame all of our relational issues on males. Nor am I telling you that girls are somehow exempt from this values conversation. Neither am I opposed to maleness and the natural banter-filled relationship that men share. The issue with the guy code is not the unique bond amongst men, but exclusively as it relates to women. It has a tendency to promote behavior that is oftentimes offensive, too many times immoral, and even at times illegal. And so while I'm not here to abolish the guy code, I do think it needs to be altered. You know, what I do find ironic about this topic is that it's actually a common belief. I mean, we're not here debating ideologies. We're not talking about good people versus bad people or males versus females. For the most part, we all believe this. There are no large groups of people just questioning the fact that we should have values. No one is debating this born of a woman theory. But I think as males, especially, we have a tendency to lose track of these values or forget the importance of these values until we're raising daughters of our own. You see, because raising a daughter, having a daughter, forces a person to analyze the world around them. We know what can happen to girls. We've been a part of those conversations. We've made those jokes. And now the only issue now is that one of those girls is my daughter. So now I have skin in the game. And so what we say is that we're going to send her to a school where she won't have to deal with certain types of boys. And we envision ourselves building a wall so high that no boy can ever get to her. But as boys, we learn to scale these walls fairly easily. And unfortunately for you, for the male, for the father, if her heart is won, she'll just hand over the key and there will be no need to scale that wall. So it appears that building the wall is not necessarily the most effective method. And in fact, the most effective method would be to build a culture of honor and respect. Now, personally, I don't have children. I don't have a daughter. But if I did have a daughter, I can imagine how I would want her to be treated. And because I would never want my daughter to be dishonored, I have resolved that I will never dishonor another man's daughter. A world where all daughters are respected is a world where my daughter will be respected. But I have to assume my role in creating that world. And see, that's why I believe that whether a man lives in Mpumalanga, South Africa, Berlin, Germany, or even Miami, Florida, he should always consider that he is helping to shape the values of a culture in which daughters will be raised, and that one of those daughters might be his own. Wherever a man may choose to live, he should always consider that he is helping to shape the values of a culture in which daughters will be raised, and that one of those daughters might be his own. So I wrote a book. I created a new guide code. It's based in honor, using that old virtue to teach a new way to the current and emerging generation. We've developed a program called 8 Years in 8th Grade, designed to teach these values of honor and respect to middle school students. Honor girls, protect women, fight human trafficking. That's our motto. And I've come here to ask you to join me in creating this new culture. Parents, and those of you who oversee this emerging generation, I want to challenge you to raise your sons as if they would one day grow up to court your daughters. Boys, I challenge you to always add value to a girl's life. Never take away, never subtract. Pride yourself on not what was done to her or with her, but that in your time together, she was valued. And girls, yes, I'll get to you. I want you to continue to raise the bar high. Expect honor. But I'm going to also ask you to respect honor. Encourage those boys who seek to do right by you. Do right by those boys who do right by you. And finally, I'm not naive to the challenge that we face. We face a great challenge. But we've overcome great moral challenges before. Because as in so many ways, we are not what we once were. And we shall one day say that about this matter as well. Because I believe that if this emerging generation of men are taught and are challenged to interact with girls, not based on how they feel in the moment, but based on what they would want for their sisters and their future daughters, that not only will we have transformed the world around us, but we'd have also created a new guide code. Honor. Now there's an idea worth spreading. Thank you.